And what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. We are back. It is not just me. We have a great guest. His name is Connor. He hails from Long Island, and we're redoing this bit because I forgot that this is going out before the other one, so we have to do it again. Hello, guest. Thanks for joining us.
You're a rookie. I go away for a week and you just fall apart. You don't know how to do anything anymore.
Fall apart. I'm looking at all the YouTube videos I posted while I was gone, and they are, oh yeah, they're setting records. That's right.
Yeah, I doubt it. Nothing's topping my Middlesbrough
Yeah,
record.
you're right. I'm sorry. I couldn't piss off enough people.
Well, that's your
Uh,
problem. You haven't pissed off enough people. I mean, do you really care about the podcast?
bro, we posted that thing 4 months ago, and it's still in our top 10 views per week. You live so rent free in their heads.
I can never visit that town now. They probably have me
It,
on wanted posters.
it is going to be on the podcast list that we are going to visit. That there, we're going to have to visit New England. We're going to have to visit all the places that hate us and just smile.
Listen, I
You are
mean, I said what I said, and it's looking pretty damn true right now. So early season, but don't hate the messenger.
you are the number two most viewed video of all time. Can you guess the number one?
It's got to be something messy related.
It's actually not, funny enough.
Really? No,
Yeah,
I can't
crazy
guess that.
enough.
Is it World
So
Cup related?
no, it's remember we when we were doing those games, we did guess the team?
Guess the team, like based off the players.
Yeah, based off of past. I made a TikTok of each one, and this one for when we did Celtic, it blew up for Celtic.
Big up
That's
Celtic.
Yeah, so all the other ones are TikToks, but they're like short videos. But the two videos that have done the most views is your Middlesbrough take and my all MLS pyramid take. So we know where our audience lies.
Yeah, we know how to get the views now.
Yeah, and you know how we don't keep the views waffling on about our views. So why don't we talk about what
That's
we're talking
true.
about today? Today in this week's MLS news, it is all about change. It's the postseason. That's great. Atlanta won one game. Red Bull on their way to MLS Cup. But with the postseason also brings the start of the preseason for eliminated clubs. And with that, big change and even bigger hype. Both the clubs and the league itself are looking at massive change, and tonight we will share our thoughts on all of it, including the proposed schedule change that may take place after the 2026 World Cup, the frustration tweets from Portland's MVP candidate Evander after a 5-0 blowout at the hands of Vancouver, and finally, we'll chat about new coaches and rumored coaches, including in Austin and San Jose. I'm Andrew, that's Connor, and here is this week's MLS news. Connor, let's just jump into Scarf of the Week 'cause we've been waffling too long. We'll get right into it. What do you got?
I've got a scarf for a miraculous comeback that is coming for not only this particular head coach, but for the number of former USMNT players that are about to make career-like comebacks. And I'm super excited to see that. Omar Gonzalez, start packing your things. You're moving to San Jose.
My coach at SCU that works with us is a big MLS guy, and I was telling him too. He's like, "Did you see Bruce might go back?" And I was like, "Yeah. Not only does Bruce go back, we are assembling the greatest almost USMNT of all time.
Oh yeah,
We
100%.
we need to sit.
Rolling back the clock.
We need to sit down and really think about what that might look like because there's a legitimate group that we could do that with.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
While you're talking, I might try and like prep that.
Go for it.
But before we do
Why
that,
don't you tell me your scarf
I
first?
would say before we do that, I got to show the scarf. And if we're talking Portland, I'm not going to miss out on a chance to bring out the Portland scarf with the tree in the middle. God, I messed it up again.
Oh, he's
Messed it up
0 for
again.
2.
I am, but it's been a tough day. But we got the tree in the middle. We've got the beautiful Portland mountain view in the back.
Which mountain is that?
It is the Portland Mountain, actually. Fun enough, it
The
is.
Portland Mountain.
It is the Mountain of Portland. It is one of the tallest mountains in Portland, actually. And you
It
know,
sounds like it's the only mountain in Portland.
well, listen, you don't know that. You've never been there, and
It is.
and We may
I
never
can tell
know.
you, I did a little Google. It is Mount Hood.
All right, we may never know, right? That's because Google is full of liars, and the only thing I can trust, I'm not going down that route because I don't
No,
need,
no,
I don't need, I'm
no.
not editing all that out. Listen, let's just jump right into it, and we will talk mountain facts later because as riveting as they are, I think people want to talk more about our thoughts on this schedule change, the biggest news from the offseason so far. Because according to reports by Paul Tenorio, MLS is floating the idea to swap its schedule to mirror the European calendar as well as many other leagues. But this idea means that a fall spring calendar with a winter break might be coming, and the changes plan on being made the summer of the World Cup. Now, there are obviously some pros and cons that come with this, and we did kind of cover this before, but let's just lay them out for the viewers and the listeners, depending on where you're watching this, and take it in for themselves, shall we? And let's start with the pros first. I want to just pick your brain. What do you got pros? Give me one, because I
So
want to give you some too.
yeah. So first one I'll go with is it's much better for the transfer window alignment with Europe. So it'll be, I think, a lot easier to make moves with teams overseas if the transfer windows kind of line up a bit more. And you won't have these like weird timing issues where one window's closed and another window's still open or whatnot. So I'll say that as my first pro.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. This would fit, and we talked about this problem in a previous episode too, which is the transfer market, right? Um, because it's so offset from Europe, you're missing out in prime real estate dates and timing, right? When the players who are most often bought and sold are right in the middle of MLS's season, they are pushing for playoffs and shields, and they're reluctant to sell. And it's a flip flop on the other end when MLS is looking to buy, it's in the middle of the European window, which they're now reluctant to sell, right? And that's not very great. And then there's also the idea of having less time to get the deals over the line as well, right? The Charlotte fiasco is a really good example of that, right? They had all these players lined up, and if you give them 2 more weeks, I guarantee you Miguel Almiron's playing in Charlotte right now.
Thank goodness they didn't have 2 more weeks.
Yeah, I know you would have cried. Um, the other one for me is that the playoffs and MLS Cup would fall into a May and June kind of window, which is in theory a less crowded portion of the American sports calendar. They still have to battle with European leagues, and the time difference there would set up an all day soccer type of vibe, which I think would be cool. But you're not competing like right now. We're competing with the World Series. Right now, we're competing with college football and NFL start of the season. And now in May and June, it's a little bit more open. So just interesting in that sort of calendar layout. It's, where do you want your playoffs to hit? Do you want it in December where NHL is starting up and you've got football and stuff like that, or do you want it in May and June where you've got some other sports that have their finals and stuff?
The other one I had you kind of covered already. It was just to stop losing key players mid-season. I think that's a tough one. I mean, I saw it this year with Atlanta, right? Like we knew Almada was gonna be gone, but if a team was gonna drop decent money on him, it was likely going to be in the summer transfer window, which was gonna, that was gonna be a big hit on Atlanta's team when even though you knew it was kind of coming, it still hurts to lose him mid-season and then have to try to replace him and make a late playoff push. So if you align the calendars to Europe, I think you take that away where now you can teams are going to like be willing to spend and move players on like you were talking about when it's more aligned with Europe. So
Yeah, 100%. The other thing is this whole problem of international windows and having to play through them and lose some of those players. You talk about losing players mid-season. Not only do we lose them in transfers, but we also lose them at international windows because we are all messed up and playing through them. And it would be a really good improvement to those clubs who seem to be punished for having these players of international caliber who are forced to play without them due to this MLS schedule. You would get pauses during the international window, and you'd get the chance to really not be hurt by these players leaving, which I think is always very good. However, this isn't the end all be all because there are also a couple of negatives that come through this, especially in the northern states, right? Because this isn't a shock to anybody that a switch in the calendar to play in the colder months up to mid December and into early February would cause some concerns in the cold weather climate. What other negatives do you see here?
Yeah, so the first one I had was the one you were kind of just talking about, just potentially lower attendance in the northern states for these like winter months if they decide to play during those months, just considering how cold it can get in places like Minnesota, Vancouver, or wherever. The other one that I had on here was, and you kind of talked about it a little bit with MLS Cup and that timing kind of working out better actually, but the regular season itself, I think, is going to be competing more with the other major US sports with this change in the window. Because right now, you're kind of majority of the regular season is in the summer period where the only thing going on is baseball. So there's less competition for people to go see those games. So you kind of have to like weigh it. And what do you want to put more emphasis on? Do you want the cup and the playoffs to have more of a chance to shine or the regular season? But
Hmm.
with the change, I think you would now see the regular season competing with the NFL, college football, the NBA, where right now you kind of just have baseball in the mix. So I think that could also take away from attendance. But the flip side is, like you said, MLS Cup could be in a good period where not only is the weather nicer, but there's not as much sports competing against it at that time.
Yeah, 100%. And you talk about the drop in attendance, and one of those things that'll be impacted is you're going to lose a lot of summer games, right? The games that you were able to get the kids out to because there's no school the next day, and the timing means that you're not seeing it during games that you would be playing in or coaching in. Those go away and they move to earlier, colder times, and you already saw it online where people are like, yeah, sorry, I'm not going to games at Yankee Stadium in March when it's 20 degrees. But I do think that you're going to see a drop in attendance, especially from those early games, right? You probably see them come back in the middle, but right as things are getting going, you're going to take a break and stop it, or the end of the season. You got to play it out, and they're gonna put out fan polls, and they're really going to try and figure out what the fans are feeling because that's going to draw it, right? That's always going to draw it. But just looking at Twitter, which as everybody knows, is a tough way to get a true feel of what's going on. It looks like it's split 50-50 straight down the middle. There are a good handful of people who love this idea. There are a good handful of people who say this is the worst idea that they've come up with ever, which is par for the course, right?
Yeah. If Twitter ever agreed on something, the world would end.
Correct, correct. You got anything else?
No, I just had those two.
Gotcha. Well, I do have one more, and it's a scheduling thing. You've got this scheduling of tournaments like Leagues Cup and US Open Cup, they're all going to get thrown into a tizzy as well, as the kids say these days. I know that's what they're saying. Listen, currently Leagues Cup is played in this month-long span from late July to the end of August. And those in charge have considered following something like playing it in hubs in the South in January and February during kind of like this off period. And that means you're definitely going to see a decrease in attendance for those matches as well. You've seen what happens when two teams who don't have a home fan base, what those games look like. They're empty, right? They are absolutely empty, and there's no fans in the stadium, right? And because League Cup is a good driver of money, and money comes from fan attendance, if that goes away, League's Cup probably goes away too. There are some people who are probably jumping at joy when you hear something like that. There are some of us who think that that's probably not a great idea. Either way, I think there are a whole bunch of different things we can talk about with Leagues Cup, and we kind of talked about how to make it better. But one of the things that might end up happening is you are changing the length of that, so you're not having to fit it into different hubs as long, and there are different ways to do that. We've talked about that too. But outside of that, you have this tournament like the U.S. Open Cup, where if MLS wants to get back into that, you are looking at trying to fit that into a new schedule. And if you're taking off those summer months, which is prime for those sorts of tournaments to be played in, you are now going to struggle to fit that in there as well. So there's a whole scheduling thing that comes up after this. Now, granted, that's easy fix, right? That's something you just sit down, you bang out, you say, okay, let's get this done. But it is still another hurdle to get over, right?
Yep.
Yeah. What do you think about the timing here? Talking about it during the 2026 World Cup, right after that.
It's not I feel like it's not a bad idea because I think that might like obviously I think the World Cup's going to get a lot more people's eyes on it, and I think it could work out in terms of like so the way I think about it is similar to the way that I kind of got to the sport, where the first thing that got me hooked was the 2014 World Cup. Got to watch the US play. It was super exciting. It was fun. I think a lot of people are going to be on that train, especially when it's being played in the US and areas nearby. I think it's going to get more people into the sport itself. And then if you lined it up where now the MLS season starts right as the World Cup's ending, that could be a big positive because then you can follow a team from the start of the season. That's what I did. Once the 2014 World Cup finished, I picked the team in I hadn't started following MLS yet. I picked a team in Europe because I'm a Euro snob and started
Nope.
following them. And it was good timing because I could follow them right at the start of the season. So I think the timing of it makes sense to me at least. I'm sure there's a lot of like other behind the scenes things that make it a lot harder to actually execute than it is to just say it and make it happen. But I feel like it would make sense for that time period because if you get more people invested through the World Cup, it's a good opportunity for them to start following the domestic local league if that's just starting up as well versus if it's midway through the season already. Might be harder for someone to kind of jump in then.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, I agree with the same thing, right? You're gonna have all these new eyes on your product, and you want to make it as familiar to those people who are watching it as possible. So matching it to what they know and saying, okay, well, we're gonna go and do, we're gonna start the same time that Europe starts, so just watch it one over the other. Hey, can you calm down over there? Like we're trying to do this show here, and you're
I'm
just,
sorry, I got too excited. I got
yeah, I know,
you mentioned
clearly.
Europe and I got too
You
excited.
just go, oh my God, Europe, yes.
Yes,
Are you
Europe.
telling me we've got a USMNT guy on the bench in Norway's second division? Get him over here. Let's go. No, but yeah, if you're trying to get these guys interested, okay, listen, watch your European leagues at 10 a.m. Go play Saturday afternoon, and then come on back at Saturday night. Watch your stuff here if that's really what you want to do. I think it's really good and how they transition between the two because you can't just stop one and start the other unless it's you're going to go with a really long off season or somebody some people have said maybe let's do like one more MLS is back type tournament in the layover time, right? Something just really big vibes and that we know it won't actually matter in the long run, but it could be a cool way to transition to it. But since we've talked about that, let's go to final thoughts here. Yay or nay? How do you feel?
I'm team yay. I say go for it. I think the negatives you can kind of work out eventually, and I think the positives will be like significantly positive and over a long period of time. I don't think it's going to be like short-term positives where then it kind of peters out. I think you can continuously keep getting positives out of this schedule change, whereas I think the cons that we had talked about, at least most of them, I think you could kind of work out the kinks of those and start to like phase those out. So I'm on board with it. I'm team yay on this one.
Oh, so you are back on Twitter because you just read the tweet that I put out 2 days ago and just regurgitated it. Nice.
I did not. I did no such thing. Just stealing your
Uh,
notes. That's all.
yeah, clearly. Yeah, the more I read about it and think about it, I'm also more team yay. And it all boils down to that idea, right? We just listed out the pros and cons. Every single negative that we listed, you can adapt to. Cold weather, your owners are billionaires. Put a roof on the thing. It's you're worried about scheduling of cups.
We
It's
have
already
technology.
yeah, it's already a nightmare to schedule cups and stuff. You can figure it out, sit down and bang it out in a day, right? Maybe Leagues Cup changes like we talked about before, less teams, more of a qualification thing instead of just everybody goes, less time off that you need to worry about. US Open Cup will always find its way through, it always does. The lost summer games is probably the biggest hit, but if the fans really do want to come out and travel and see these teams and players play, they're going to do that. And at the end of the day, you're still getting a nice sweet chunk of that Apple money, right? And I reiterate, you have billions of dollars. You will be okay, right? But the positives that we have, if you don't make this change, none of those positives can be brought back in, right? You can not line up the schedule properly and get your transfer market to line up where you are buying and selling at the same prime times. Now you can shift it to give yourself more time to be competitive, but you're never going to be able to say, okay, yeah, I'll just take one of your players and we'll be fine. Or you can take, buy one of mine and we'll be fine. Right? That it'll never line up that way. And the same thing for international breaks. We're never going to find that way to figure it out unless we change things. And that changes the quality of the league. It changes the quality of the games that are played, and it changes the amount of people who want to keep coming back and watching because, as we mentioned, players, individuals are one of the main reasons that most people watch games to start. If you're showing up and saying, "Oh man, I'm here to watch Emil Forsberg," and Emil Forsberg goes off to Sweden, and you have to play without him for 6 to 8 weeks if he goes to Euros or whatever, well, now you've just lost maybe not a significant portion, significant to Red Bull because all five people who would miss out are like 35% of the fan base. But you can't bring those positives back if you don't do this. You can avoid the negatives, you can't bring back those positives. And the reason that I do think that it's going to get better, or we all better get ready for this, is because it sounds like the college game is preparing to do this as well. There was a really cool thread that came out and this is a whole second episode, we can't dive too deep into it, but basically said that college is looking to make soccer, at least at the first division level, a 2 semester sport to line up with this fall spring schedule with MLS and assumedly MLS Next Pro, which makes sense because a ton of MLS Next Pro guys roll in D1 anyway. But you're looking at lining it up and basically making it another feeder team that has the same schedule and all this other sort of stuff. If it's happening all the way down at that level, you have a good feeling it might be a long term thing. But at the end of the day, but at the end of the day, like you said, the positives outweigh the negatives, and you can work on improving the negatives and be successful long term. I'm here for it.
Woo. Go team.
Boop.
Boop.
We're here for Go Team. Some guy who's not here for Go Team, our guy Evander over in Portland. Another very fun story for some of us, very sad for others. After the scheduling debacle of Vancouver's supposed to be home play-in game, they traveled to Portland and absolutely dog-walked them 5-0 in their own backyard. After the game, Portland MLS MVP candidate Evander took to Twitter to express his frustrations, including the calling out of an ownership group and apologizing to the fans. He goes out to say that the Portland fans do not deserve the people who have power over the club, those who say they are men but do not keep their word, those who are only there for when the team wins, a scathing review of the team's best player, which stems from his lack of trust in the ownership group who have fallen short on promises to pay him in a new contract. So the question is, should he have gone public?
I don't have a problem with it, honestly. I mean, I think. Well, so the thing I was going to ask you, and I think you already answered it, was the part about where he mentions, do not keep their word, like what exactly that meant. But it sounds like based off what you were saying, it's in regards to getting him a new contract. But I mean, I'm here for it. I'm fine with him going public on it. I mean, it's good to see somebody on his level, that being an MVP finalist, speaking out against higher ups who may not be necessarily pulling their weight in this situation. And we don't know I don't think we fully know the behind the scenes. So I can't say exactly like what it means when he says do not keep their word. Even if it is in regards to a contract, like what exactly that means in terms of like timing, money, like was there even an offer on the table, whatnot, all of that stuff. So, take my opinion with a grain of salt because, obviously it's MLS. We never know fully what all these things are going on. But if he's upset with the way that, things have been run in the what's it considered, like the upper management, higher office, whatever, then I think it's good for him to speak his mind on that, especially if he's echoing a sentiment that's maybe shared between other players on the team. He's someone who he can kind of get away with this more than like the third string goalkeeper if he was doing the same thing, because if the team is like, all right, we don't like how you handled this, we're just gonna get rid of you, cut your contract and let you go. They're just shooting themselves in the foot here. Like he's an MVP finalist. Like he's got some like he's got a foothold in this team for him, enough of a foothold in the team for him to like be able to come out and publicly talk about these things. And just kind of like reading through the Twitter thread and also on Reddit, it seemed like Portland fans really liked his message. I'm sure some of that is recent frustration with the way that that play-in game had gone. But I mean, I feel like if Evander's getting the support that he is, then I feel like maybe he's justified in the way that he's feeling if the fans feel the same way as well.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. I personally don't like taking my problems to Twitter, especially after like a big moment like that. Now I've done that once or twice, but I also am just complaining about the Red Bull being the Red Bull, and nobody cares about what I have to say anyway. But I think that it could have done Evander some good to hold off and cool off before saying something like that. We usually, in the soccer world, at least where I come from, have the 24-hour rule. Like if you have problems with what the coach did or whatever he did, you wait 24 hours to even, to talk about it or to share it with somebody, whatever, and then we go forward and chat about it. And from what it sounds like, based off of reports, is that he got his anger out as well. He got into it with Ned Grabavoy at the end of the game. In the locker room, he claimed that the loss was on him for not building the team right and all this stuff. But I get that you're understand. I get and I understand that you're frustrated with the loss and you're frustrated because your contract isn't there. And you mentioned the fans seem to be behind him. And at the end of the day, you got walked 5-0 on your home pitch by your rivals. And this wasn't an Inter Miami team, right? They're one spot ahead of you in the table, and you're even on points. You guys are the same level, and they showed up and you didn't. Could the team have been built better? Sure. But pretending like Portland didn't just go out and spend big money on backline pieces like Miller and Crepeau just for them to ship a ton of goals, or to pretend that you didn't drop 8 figures on a striker that dropped 16 goals in 29 games for you this year is silly. Vancouver have only spent an extra $2 million on salary over Portland this year, and they're both at the bottom half of salary when you get to San Diego make 30 teams. This isn't like Miami spent 4 times what you've spent and they kicked crap out of you. Your rivals showed up and you didn't. So I think for him to come out and just blame the front office for their inability to perform is tough. I think it's a stretch. Like I'm not saying like that's exactly like I'm not saying it's not me, it's them, but to go out and throw them under the bus like that when they quite clearly spent good money to try and build this team, I think it's uncalled for, personally.
Yeah, it's kind of tough to like it's a little tough to figure out because I feel like maybe there's more behind the scenes of like what exactly led to this point because it's not like this just happened all of a sudden. It obviously it kind of built up to this point where eventually it boiled over and this frustration came out. But I think it is now. I mean, I don't know if you count the play-in game as technically making the playoffs, but
Hmm.
making the playoffs proper. It's the third season in a row now that they haven't made it. So at some point you kind of got to look above the player level and start saying like maybe there is an issue somewhere higher up in the team that just isn't getting addressed because I mean like 3 straight years missing the playoffs for Portland is like unheard of. I mean this team before that point was just constantly consistently one of the better Western Conference teams and constantly in the playoffs and it seems they've shifted very quickly away from that and it's very drastically away from that as well.
Yeah, and there's definitely more that goes into this that we don't know, but um, it just and he does, right. I was the reason I wasn't looking at the screen is 'cause I was rereading the thread, and he does, he takes it on his shoulder, and um it was me, I could have done better, um but also tossing that in there is something. I don't know. I just it felt like that wasn't needed. All he had to do is come out and say, "Yeah, that's on me. I could have done better," and just move on. Right? You didn't need to do that because you got it out. You got it out in the locker room. You got it out behind closed doors. You really didn't. Honestly, now that I'm reading it again, I don't. He really didn't take any accountability for it at all. Right? I want to apologize to the fans on a Wednesday night, dropped everything to support us. Really hard to lose the way we did. The losing is not in our plans, but we have to deal with it. The players and the entire staff did everything we could to take Portland as far as possible. However, sometimes we have no control over what happens, and what happens on the field reflects, or what happens off the field reflects on the field. Portland do not deserve the people who have power over the club. Like we talked about, unfortunately, these are the things we have no control over. I have always fought and will continue to fight to put this team on top. To the fans, you deserve much more. Thank you for your unconditional support. We'll see you next season. That to me is, now that I've reread that a little bit closer, I hate all of that. Not once did you go up and say, "Hey, we didn't perform well enough. We didn't step up and do our job well enough." It was always we couldn't do it because we weren't allowed to do it. And I think that's not true at all.
It's I would be very interested to see what other teammates have to say on this. I think if they back to what Evander said, I think it adds validity to the way that he feels, and it probably opens the door to there is issues higher up in the team. But if people are quiet about it and not really like echoing his feeling on the blame higher up, maybe that's more of a just an Evander thing, in which case I would be more on board with the way you feel, but I don't know. I mean, I feel like I'm fine with what he said. Maybe he could have waited a little bit longer to say it instead of so quickly after that game. But why don't you fill us in on how, and I don't know if we have responses from the other players on the team, but what about Neville and Grabavoy? What did they have to say on this?
Yeah, listen, right. The next day, those two did respond, and they did very professionally, right? They came out and they expressed their disappointment with his decision and with his actions, and they're not mad enough to kick him out the door, probably because he's kind of good, but they are disappointed in his actions. Do you agree with that? Do you agree that they are, um, that is the right way to go about it? Should they be sending him off? What's the deal? What do you feel?
Like, you mean selling him? Is that what you mean by sending him
Sell
off?
him, suspend him, anything like that?
I feel like the way the fans are responding to this, you would be digging yourself into a bigger hole if you sold him. I mean, maybe you can get away with a short suspension at the start of next year because people might just kind of forget about it. But I I think if you sold him, fans would be very upset about that. I mean, they seem to love him. People seem to be very on board with the way that he has been like outspokenly critical of Grabavoy and other upper management people. So I think selling him would be probably the wrong move. But at the same time, I mean, this may be like you may have slashed this relationship too much to the point where you can't recover it. And then at that point, it's like, are you doing more damage to just keep him around? Or do you have to just kind of let him go at that point? I'm kind of on the fence. I'm not too sure how to go about it, but I'm leaning more towards it would be worse to sell him. Not to mention he's an MVP finalist. Like he's like on the field, he is a great player.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I agree with the way with their feelings, and I was impressed with how they handled it. And Tommy Scoop said it best, right? They very easily could have gone up there and just said, "Yeah, this is a closed matter behind closed doors, and we're not going to comment on it," and ask something else. But they didn't. They handled it well. They played it down, like they should have, and they moved on, right? I like the way they did that. They both kind of got their shot out there, for lack of a better term. He took his shot at them. They came out and responded. It's water on the bridge. They move on. But I do agree that this might be writing on the wall that Evander wants out. It may not be that they want to get him out, but he might be trying to force his way out, which I think is a little unfair to Portland because based off of what I was reading, they offered him a new deal. They offered to make him a top 15 paid player in the league, a contract worthy of an MVP finalist, and he turned it down and said he couldn't trust them anymore. I don't know. Looking on outside looking in, it feels like he's just trying to force his way out. I'm not saying he doesn't love the city and doesn't love the club. I mean, the passion's clearly there, but I'm wondering if there's something that I have skimmed over I don't know about that hasn't really come to light, and he's now looking for other options.
I was actually just scrolling through the Reddit because on that same topic, someone had made a post in there about how apparently Evander wanted to move to Flamengo and the Timbers rejected it. If
Mm,
that is the case, that could be a part of it as well, I'm sure. And maybe to your point, maybe this is his way of trying to force that move.
yeah, yeah, and again, I think that's tough. But if you don't want to be here, you don't want to be here. Sure, it's just That's a tough way to do it because they were going to pay you really good money. So,
Yeah, for sure.
all right. Well, if we're talking about people who are going to pay good money, we're not about to talk about that here because these are coaches, and coaches don't get paid well. We've got one rumor and one confirmed. So why don't we just really quickly chat about that before we end today's episode? And we'll start with the confirmed one because that's a less fun one. We'll end with the fun one. We're going to start with Austin appointing former FC Dallas head coach and USMNT assistant coach Nico Estevez as their newest head coach, taking over from Josh Wolf. Another one of the Triple G coaching tree landing in MLS. He had 2 solid years with FC Dallas before a slow start in 2024 kicked him to the curb. What are your thoughts on this one? How do you feel?
I am not on board with this. This is yet another recycled MLS manager coming off of a failed MLS stint. It's like it's just a cycle at this point. It's like there's a pool of coaches and they can only select from within that pool. Like I'd like to see a team just be a little bit more adventurous with these signings. Like Charlotte went outside of the bubble and hired Dean Smith. And look what he was able to do to that team. He turned them around completely. Like they were a team that was on the cusp of a play-in spot, like for pretty much since they existed. And now he turned them into the best defensive team in the league and fifth in the playoffs or fifth in the East. Like, let's be a little bit more adventurous here, a little bit more ambitious. Like, why do we need to keep recycling the same coaches that have failed in this league? So, one other thing I did was I took a look at similar types of hirings heading into the 2024 season. So guys that were previously managers in the league that got hired again on a new team in 2024. So we've got Phil Neville in Portland.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we see how we just talked about it. We see how that's been going.
He
They were
made the
the ninth seed
playoffs.
into the expanded everybody makes it in playoffs, and then got gobsmacked by Vancouver at home. Caleb Porter in New England, one of the worst teams in the league, and nearly conceded the most goals in MLS history. And then the most successful was Chris Armas in Colorado, and the most successful was seventh place in the Western Conference. So it's not a good track record. I don't think it's the way to go. I'd like teams to at least take a shot with somebody. Like I'd rather them take a shot like DC or Montreal has, where if you want to go with somebody in the league, at least take a shot with somebody who hasn't had an opportunity yet but has shown promise, as opposed to these same guys who have been fired by other teams because they couldn't get the job done. Like it's just getting tiring of seeing the same few coaches just get recycled around the league, unless you're someone like, not going to spoil it, that we'll talk about in a little bit, unless you're like in that, like, uh what's the right word, cohort of,
Cohort.
yeah, unless you're in that like legendary cohort.
Your hatred for former MLS managers is brutal, considering one of them should be coaching the USMNT right now and he isn't. You didn't say that about Triple G. Crazy.
I didn't say that about Triple G, right?
I know what next episode's gonna be. Um, no, I agree with you. This is super underwhelming for me. It's safe. He's got MLS experience. He's got national team experience. He knows Texas pretty well. Austin likes his style, but you go from Josh Wolf, who was not great. He was okay. And you got tons of options to go from here, depending on how you want to take your team and the identity. Estevez was never really bad. 2024 was bad, but he got a lot of injuries. But he never took this team and made them like, I need to watch FC Dallas. They were first or second round playoff teams every year, seventh and 14th in the Shield. Nothing ever popped off the page for them to be like, oh my God. And once again, I think he brought FC Dallas back to, they played today. Who's on their team? No, surely not. Right? Like, is he going to bring much of a change? No. And because Austin's kind of the same way. I couldn't tell you 5 players who played on Austin this year. I mean, I probably could because I have no life and I look at MLS stats all day.
Yeah, who are you
But
lying to?
yeah. But right, they weren't a team that was like, oh, this is going to be, we need to watch Austin. And I don't think he brings them to that level, right? The West is top heavy. That you've got really heavy hitters in the West. I don't think he brings them there. But do you think that Austin are going to be better off with him? That's a question.
I mean, I think best case scenario, and maybe this will come back to bite me. I think best case scenario, they're like a seven, like maybe a six, probably more likely like a seven, eight, nine seed, like just squeak into the playoffs. And I think reality is they stick to exactly where they are right now, which is like maybe a just on the cusp nine seed play in team or just missing out 10, 11, 12. So I think they stay pretty much the same. I don't think they get any better or worse, which is not a good it's not a good thing. It's a negative because you need to get better. You missed the playoffs. So
I'm with you there. I don't think they could get too much worse, but I don't see them turning into LAFC or LA Galaxy or even RSL. Like this might, I agree, it might bump into the 6 to 9 range, maybe, depending on how their offseason goes. He's shown that he's solid in player development. Assistant to the national team that saw this resurgence of the men's national team in CONCACAF, youth team managers in Spain, director of the Columbus Academy for 2 years, assistant manager under Greg. It's not splashy, but this isn't a Chicago or San Jose that needs safe and solid, right? I think they needed somebody who could enlist the trust of the front office to go say, go give me one more 7-figure player and I will make this work. I will get you not just to the playoffs, I'll get you a home playoff game, right? High expectations to warrant high spending. And I just don't think that's this guy. And for Austin to have one good year in the last 3 or 4, however long they've been around, and them not to try and break themselves into there, it feels like a miss. But I'm happy to be proven wrong.
we shall see.
Yeah. You know who else proved some people wrong?
Who?
King Bruce, because people thought he wouldn't come back, and here he is making the grand return. Enter Sandman playing in the background. Bruce Arena's MLS ban seems to have been lifted, or is at least in the process of being lifted. It might have been lifted a while ago, and nobody knew because they just stuck it under the rug. But he is rumored to be in negotiations, serious negotiations, with San Jose for their opening at the head coach spot. The winningest coach in MLS history returns again to save San Jose from themselves. Thoughts?
Yeah, so this is what I was hinting at before, where if you're going to bring in a guy with MLS experience, I think it's got to be somebody who's just that upper echelon. Someone who's been a proven winner, not someone who's just, okay, we've gotten them in the playoffs. Like Bruce Arena he's the cream of the crop when it comes to domestic MLS coaches. He is the best to ever do it. And he's the only man, I think, who could potentially save the San Jose team because, my God, they have a lot of work to do because they were brutally bad this year. I still would love to know what the hell happened that he was like on this exodus for however long it was. Maybe we'll find out now that he's coming back, but I doubt it. So I hope I'm not backing him and he's actually done some like horrible stuff in the background, but I think he would be a significant upgrade for them. I think if they bring him in and they get it across the line, they've knocked it out of the park, and I think we'll see San Jose moving in the right direction.
Yeah, so I love Bruce's back. I don't know what he can do with the roster though, right? If you think about LA, and you were kind of hinting at this before, think about LA. For 8 years, he always had some sort of superstar. Donovan, Keno, Beckham, just the list goes on, right? When he took over New England, he had one solid MLS player in Carlos Heel to lead a group of young homegrowns and promising draft picks like Mac Turner and Tejan Buchanan. And he was in front of a very defensively sound, no nonsense backline. In San Jose, they really don't have either of that. They don't have that big star, and they very clearly do not have
Disagree. They do have the big star, in my
All right,
opinion.
listen. You keep William Yarborough's name out of your goddamn mouth.
Yeah, it's Jackson Ewell. I'll have you know.
Don't worry, we'll talk about him in a second. But they're very clearly not being defensively sound either. Now that they are record holders of the wrong kind, so I don't quite see him making a huge impact, especially with John Fisher reluctant to buy a pair of socks for the team, let alone a player who can be semi decent. But that being said, I'm never one to doubt the abilities of Bruce Arena, and I'm sure that we are ready to see him win the Shield with William Yarbrough in goal, Jackson Ewell and Omar Gonzalez center back pairing, and Chris Wondolowski scoring 90 goals out of retirement just because Bruce said come out and play.
I think it's very easy to overhaul a team in MLS. That's the nice thing about the parity that the league has set up. I think if it could be a busy offseason for San Jose. If they're not busy, then yes, I'd be concerned with the current roster they have. If it's busy and they're able to make moves, I could see Bruce bringing in the guys that he knows can play his style and effectively play his style and turning this team around. I'm not saying like they'll go from 14th to top three in the Western Conference, but I think he could turn this team around pretty significantly and see them in like a play-in situation for next year if he gets the right guys in, which I don't think the right guys have to be like Erling Haaland for this team. I mean, he was able to get good results out of guys you wouldn't expect when he was in New England. You know, guys like Bobby Wood, right? Like he can find those kind of under the radar gems and get the best out of them. So I see a path forward for him. I think I agree with you that the current roster needs a lot of work. But I think there's good pieces in play. I mean, in my opinion, you do have the star. You have Christian Espinosa, who we saw 2 seasons ago, was genuinely MVP finalist level. And if Bruce can get him back to that, then I think that's his Carl Seal right there.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. So I don't know if Christian Espinosa is the guy. I think he's a very good player, but I don't know if he's the guy. So, what I think you see, and the reason I say that is because I think Bruce goes back to the basics. Taking over a team that just set the goals against record all time, step one is not going to be how are we going to get Christian Espinosa to score 50 goals. Step one is going to be how can we make sure that this ball doesn't go in the net 80 times this season. So his first goal is how do I stop conceding goals? 4-2-3-1, double pivot that are not even going to be ball advancers. Just win the ball and kick it forward. Like so simple. Do not let the ball go in the goal. Right. So again, I don't want to have to continue to repeat this, but the object of the game is kick the ball between the white posts more than the other team. And if you let the other team do that more than you don't win a lot of games. So stop them from kicking the ball between the white posts. Right. Then get yourself a 10 that can drop into the pocket and pick up the second ball and drive forward with a group of attackers that are dynamic enough to make things happen when they're either numbers down or they're numbers even. Right. So wide players like Espinoza who can float inside will be very helpful for that. But I'm looking at somebody like Carlos Heel. Carlos Heel was able to take, like you just mentioned, he picked up the ball in the half space. He would either drift wide or drift down, turn, look forward, and he's got Emma Boateng on the left. He's got Bobby Wood up top, and he's got I can't remember who played on the right side with him. Like genuinely, Tommy McNamara maybe? Like I don't know. Like genuinely, like he was able to turn all of that into something special. Tajon Buchanan, I'll give him that too. Tajon was on that side too, but he was able to turn those players and get them really really successful. So if you can find somebody like that, and I think it only gets better with Espinoza on one of those sides, right? Bring something up to that level. But if they can go out and find a 10 that changes the game and a number 6 that is I can't say Diego Chara level, but like Jose Martinez level of win the ball and give it to the next guy. You get those two players down the spine of your team, San Jose are instantly a better team. And I think that is what they need to see. And I think they do it, and this is going to be wild. I think they do it by going back to MLS 2.0. John Fisher's going to have to open his checkbook or open his GAM book. And honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if somebody like Sebastian Lletget or Matt Polster or Tim Parker are on their short list of players who are like, yeah, let's just build an identity of not being broken down like a piece of plywood. And let's go ahead and get people who have been in this league, understand how to win in this league, and will just grind and do the hard work and that have some sort of ties to the USMNT because I'm Bruce Arena and I will recreate this entire group.
It's funny. Those were a couple of the guys that I was thinking as well, like Leggett and Tim Parker. guys who
Yeah.
could jump to this one. But what I wanted to say was, I think, the things you had talked about, they could potentially already have that on their team. I I mean, it would depend on how what Bruce can get out of them. I mean, obviously last season they weren't exactly getting the level they needed out of these players, but I mean, your number 10 could be Hernan Lopez. They've just brought him in. Um,
Hmm.
he could be an option for them in that role. If he's more of a goal scorer, then why not just flip it? Make Espinosa the playmaker. I mean, as bad as San Jose was this year, Espinosa had 13 assists, not even counting second assists. So the guy can clearly play make. So if you need to play him in the middle, play him in the middle. And then in terms of the six who can win the ball, maybe that's Carlos Grueza for you. I mean, I think he's got the potential to be that guy for you, especially if you simplify his role and just say, hey, just win the ball, and that's all you need to do. Then just pass it off to Jackson Ewell next to you, and he'll do the rest of it from there. I mean, I think there's people in place on the roster where, at least like in the midfield to the attack, there's options already there. I do agree with you though, the back line needs an overhaul. And
Hmm.
maybe it's with guys like Tim Parker leading that line. But we'll see. It'll help too to get some of their goalkeepers back healthy.
Yeah. Well, and that tells you all you need to know, right? I forgot Hernan Lopez, a $6 million signing, even existed. Like that's how bad they were. But completely agree with you that that would be you've got pieces there already. But that's why I don't think that you're going to see, because again, John Fisher not spending money, right? He's spent $6 million already. Like, good luck. That's 10 years worth of investment, right? Like, calm down. But GAM is not actual money, right? It is funny money. So if Sebastian Lletget and if FC Dallas are like, all right, here we go, let's revamp this up, and Sebastian Lletget becomes available, yeah, Bruce is going at him 100%. Tim Parker's contract was up at the end of the year. He probably can very easily bring him back. I don't think he got re-signed. I don't remember if I saw him get re-signed. But yeah, you've got tons of options there. And I'm just looking up some old American players that are still in the league, right?
Raguzan,
I say DeAndre Yedlin.
DeAndre Yedlin. I forgot about that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and here's Aaron Long. Yes, sir.
I think
Um,
Bobby Wood's still kicking around.
Bobby Wood's still there. You got Ryan Hollingshead.
Ryan
Yeah.
Hollingshead. Yeah.
Give me King Brad. Played for him in 2004.
God, did he really?
Sebastian Lletget, probably. Let's be real. Sebastian Lletget can be in there. Here's crazy, and Tim Ream from Charlotte. um, so here, ready? Crazy conspiracy, right? Brooks Lennon obviously just got hurt in game against Miami, not quite producing at the level that they thought he'd be. He's been good, not great defensively. He's been better attacking, right, as he usually does. San Jose throw the bank at him, get him, sign Tim Parker as a free agent, throw him up top with Espinoza, Hernan Lopez, and Abobasi if he comes back with because like you mentioned, we talked about it before. They were really injured last year too, right? So you've got that front four with Gruezo and Jackson Ewell. You get Tim Parker to pair alongside Rodriguez. Put the two new outside backs that you signed last year, and get Daniel back in goal at full health. That could be really fun.
It could be. I feel like we said the same thing heading into the season, and then it completely blew up. But
Well, you got to be healthy, right? But
yeah,
I low key, I'd love to see Brooks Lennon at San Jose with
of course you would. You just want to see
with
him off Atlanta.
no, I want to see him with Bruce Arena. Brooks, why are you not tracking 90 yards to win the ball? Brooks. He's got that accent too, right? The New York accent, the Brooklyn accent. Oh man,
Maybe we
that'd
could
be
do a
fun.
trade. If Abobasi wants out, Atlanta needs a striker anyway. We'll just swap Lennon for Abobasi.
Lennon for a Boba. You throw a three-team trade in there. You get Bobby Wood back for a bucket of balls, and you call it a day.
They're assembling. Bruce is assembling his Avengers.
Yes, yeah. Well, we could sit here and talk Avengers all day long, but I think we ought to wrap it up here. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you follow us wherever you get your podcasts. You know, the next time we go live, next Wednesday's episode or this upcoming Wednesday's episode is finishing up what went wrong. So be sure to check that out. Um, and then make sure you follow us on social media so you know when we post things, you can interact with us and chat with us. It's a lot of fun. We're getting our followers up, and we got more of you to chat with. So thanks so much, everyone, for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. See ya.